Imagine what it's like to be king of the whole world, boys and girls, to have so much gold and silver and money that you just don't know what to do with it. Well, that's how it was for King Nebuchadnezzar. And he decided that he was going to do something amazing with it. He was going to make a god of pure gold, an idol that everybody would have to bow down and worship. Well, the first thing that he had to do was he had to make himself a furnace. So he got his builders on it, and they built this furnace, and they would put the gold in one, and it'd bubble away, and then it'd come out and poured into molds. And the greatest goldsmiths and artisans and artists of the time would hammer, and eventually the king's golden idol was finished. He invited everybody from the known world who was important, kings and princes and MPs from all over the world, to the special unveiling ceremony. Well, you can see this, but they couldn't. It was covered with a great big blanket. And then a man, one of the king's servants, blew his trumpet. Everyone went silent, a cord was pulled, and the blanket fell, and everybody could see the unveiled statue the king had made. There was a gasp from the crowd. It was 30 meters high, 3 meters wide, and it was made of pure gold. Wow. Then the man with the trumpet blew it again. Another servant unrolled a scroll, and there it said, a new command from the king. To you, all people of every nation and language, is given a brand new command by the great king Nebuchadnezzar. Everyone wondered, wonder what the new king's command is. And then he read on. When you hear the sound of the band and the instruments, you must bow down and worship the golden statue that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Imagine that, boys and girls, worshipping a lump of gold. That'd be stupid, wouldn't it? Well, there you go. But I must tell you about the small print. Just at the bottom, it said this. Anyone who does not bow down to the statue of the king will be thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. That puts a little bit of a different angle on it, doesn't it, boys and girls? Well, needless to say, when the band played, every single person there that day bowed down and worshipped the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Everyone except the 3 guys. Now, I don't know if they weren't there that day. I don't know if they were busy working for the king. But what I do know is this. These men had decided in their hearts that they would not bow down to the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had made. And the reason was this. Because they loved the living God. Not an idol made of human hands. They loved the living God, the true God. The God who would one day show the whole world his love by sending his son Jesus to this earth, so that we, ordinary people, could know him as a friend and a saviour. Well, there were some people who were quite jealous of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they took their opportunity one day, as the king was admiring his statue again, and they came up to him and they said, Your Majesty, a beautiful statue. I know, said the king, thanks. Oh, you know what, Your Majesty? Even in our spare time we come and we bow and we worship. Really, said the king. Oh, yes, Your Majesty, because we love the statue that you set up. Thank you, said the king. But it's a pity not everyone in the kingdom thinks the same. Sorry, said the king. What do you mean? Well, you see, there's these couple of guys, I think there's 3 of them actually, and they said, I'm trying to remember the quote, I'm not bowing down to the stupid statue the king has made. That was it, Your Majesty. What, said the king? That's ridiculous. Nobody would dare say that about the great King Nebuchadnezzar. Your Majesty, these guys are foreigners. They're from another land. Who are they, said the king. Their names are, I remember, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Oh, nonsense, said the king. I know these men very well. They always are good and obedient and kind and honest. They do everything that I ask of them. They're great guys. Your Majesty, they won't bow down to your statue. I can guarantee it. Bring them to me, said the king. I'll show you these men are good. And so they were brought to King Nebuchadnezzar in front of the statue. And then the king said, Guys, these men have said you're not going to bow down to my statue, so you just show them that you will. Because you're always good and kind and honest. Certainly, Your Majesty, there's just one problem. We won't. See, I told you, said the... Sorry? we won't bow down, Your Majesty, to the statue. I don't think you understand, guys. If you don't bow to my statue, I've written a law that says, if you don't, you will be thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. So do us a favour, and do yourselves a favour, bow down. Your Majesty, we will not bow. The king could feel the anger raising inside him. And he said this, if you do not bow down, you will be thrown into my furnace, and there is no God in heaven or earth that can save you from my furnace. Our God can, and he will. And Your Majesty, do you know what? Even if he doesn't, let it be known, we will not bow to your statue. Boys and girls, do you know what? They were so confident of their faith in God. And I think it's because of this. They knew there was more to life than just the here and now. You see, they knew there was more to life than what we see around us. They knew there was a heaven for all those who love and follow God, which is why Jesus came to this planet. He was a sacrifice for the wrong that we've done, so that we can be friends with God and ultimately share heaven. It's amazing, isn't it? But the king was furious. If it's possible for steam to come out of somebody's ears, it would have done. And so he shouted to his men, heat up the furnace 7 times hotter than it needs to be to melt gold. Well, boys and girls, you can imagine. The coal was thrown on and the flames were bursting through. The king called for 3 of his strongest soldiers. Tie these men and take them to the furnace. Dun, dun, dun. Well, Shadrach was taken first. One of the strong soldiers took him up onto the edge, tied hand and foot, and he threw him into the furnace. And as he landed, the flames went. It was so hot that it actually killed the soldier throwing Shadrach in. So Shadrach fell into the midst of the furnace, and the soldier fell off the side dead. Exactly the same happened with Meshach and Abednego. As they were thrown in, the flames came up and killed the soldiers throwing them in. So, get this, guys. There were 3 bodies in the furnace, 3 bodies outside the furnace. Yes? Right. So the king, who was still fuming, decided he was going to go to the little window to make sure these guys were frying, disobeying the king's command and everything. And that's when he had problems. You see, he thought his maths lessons as a kid had been wrong all those times, because 1 + 1 + 1 equals 3. Of course it does. And when he looked in the window, shall I show you what he saw? When he looked in the window, this is what the king saw. 1, 2... What? Huh? You see, there was Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego all walking about in the flames unharmed, but there was someone else there as well, somebody that wasn't thrown in with them. And the king said this, it looks like the son of a god. Well, boys and girls, he was almost right. Not the son of a god, that was superstitious. He was the son of God in the flames with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, looking after them. It was amazing. The king shouted, oh, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, friends of the Most High God, come out, please. I've made a terrible mistake. So Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, they came out of the flames. The king and all his servants gathered around and they sniffed them. They didn't smell smoke. Their beards weren't singed. In fact, the only thing destroyed by the flames were the ropes that were holding them and binding them. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out, and the king was humbled because he thought he was quite important, being king of the world. But these guys were friends of God, the one true God, the one who made heaven and earth. The king's knees started to knock together. And so he decided he'd send a letter to the whole known world at the time. And the letter said this, there is only one God who can truly save. And that's the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And you know what, boys and girls? 3,000 years later, it's still true. There is only one God who can save. The God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.